Hey everyone, you're listening to Anti Moonboy News. My name's Xenu. We got a good one today for you guys. We will be covering week 1 of Tornado Cash and the trial that really is the biggest trial and court case that has faced cryptocurrency since its inception. There's massive implications for this, so we will be covering it on a week-to-week basis, and the first week just passed, so we will be going through all the details on that. But first, we have some super chats. You can go to xmrchat.com/Xenu if you'd like to donate. And we have 3 this week. The first one from Arcane Numismatics. He donates 0.11 XMR. Thanks for that big super chat, man. I really appreciate it. And it also does look like he had some issues sending the message, so feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll give you a second question next week because it looks like you had trouble with XMR chat. Anyways, he asks, I see you're a tiling window manager, Chad. What's your Linux setup? Yeah, so I recently built a new computer, and so part of the process was doing a fresh install of Linux. And for those who don't know, a tiling window manager is a way of, instead of the floating windows that most people use, like with the Windows operating system, where you kind of just make windows and you can kind of drag them around the screen and whatever. A tiling window manager, the screens just kind of pop on your screen like tiles, basically. And there's a lot of customization that goes with it, but it's pretty cool because you can kind of just hit commands on your keyboard and it'll just pop up right on your screen. And I did just buy a new monitor that's relatively big, so I thought I would try out a tiling window manager. And yeah, I gotta say, I've joined the cult now. I really like it. It's very smooth. I like the customization with it. And if you've never tried one out, I do recommend at least giving it a try. Maybe just download a virtual machine and kind of play around with it. But once you kind of get used to it, it just makes things a lot quicker. So anyways, I had a video that I made for PGP, basically like a tutorial video that's on my channel. I'm going to talk about that later in this podcast. But I kind of showed off my setup in that video. So Arcane Numismatics did notice. Now, as for which tiling window manager I'm using Qtile. I ended up choosing Qtile just because I have some limited Python experience, and you can basically hack Qtile with knowledge of Python. So I do have some ideas of things I want to do in the future, but I kind of like the idea of having a Windows manager that I can like customize if I wanted to, right? And furthermore, I did do a little research beforehand and kind of like poked around at different tiling window managers. I was looking at Awesome for a little bit, which is kind of a more user-friendly version of DWM, which is used by a lot of people. Luke Smith uses DWM, for example. I did look at i3 as well, but yeah, I eventually just went with Qtile just because of the whole Python thing. So, and honestly, most of these Windows managers are pretty similar to each other. I don't really think there's like that much of a difference. Like for about 5 years, I used KDE, and I like KDE a lot. But yeah, I think I'm going to be using a tiling window manager from here on out. It's just much smoother, much snappier, and yeah, much more customizable. So if you are into that sort of thing, I do recommend checking that out. But yeah, thanks for the donation, man. I appreciate that. Next up, we got Leo, and he donates 0.04 XMR. And he says, sad to see the self-censoring on YouTube. Playing along to the rules of a bully doesn't stop the bullying. One day, CensorTube will deplatform you anyway. Here's another fun topic that should make it through the self-censor filter. It's about DNA. DNA doesn't exist. There are various talks about that on YouTube, and then he posts some links. So, okay. Well, thank you very much for that donation, Leo. And he actually donated last week as well. So nice to see you back. Yeah, I got to respond to this whole notion that I'm playing along to the rules of a bully Yeah, it's not really the case at all. First off, I was kind of exaggerating the amount of self-censoring I'm doing. Because, this really isn't like a politics show for the most part. I mean, talking about political things is inevitable, especially when you have like cypherpunk philosophy as a backdrop to everything, when it comes to, peer-to-peer cash. But, for the most part, I'm saying whatever I want. But really the bigger issue though is, the reason I want to stay on YouTube is because 95% of my audience is on YouTube. Okay, like just look at the data from the amount of streams I'm getting, the amount of likes I'm getting, the amount of subscriptions I have, and compare YouTube with Odyssey and Rumble. And YouTube just mogs the other two. That's just how it is. And so kind of having this idea of like, screw YouTube, that kind of thing, it's not a good idea. I'd rather just play the game, And so part of that is not touching just a couple topics or, not, saying whatever's on my mind. But it's really no different than like how I would like act in real life, right? Like I'm not going to like spurg out if I'm having a conversation with, somebody at the dinner table or whatever. Like I'm going to keep things calm and rational and grounded, right? And so there's like certain topics like I want to bring up, or at least saying it in certain ways. Like it's not like an Xbox Live chat room, well, not currently. I think they moderate things now, but like go back to like, 2009 Halo, like that era, it's not like that anymore. Unfortunately, those were the days. But yeah, I wouldn't do that anyways. That's not really my style. I like with this show to have, something that pretty much anyone can listen to. And yeah, occasionally we talk about, edgy topics. Like, I mean, dude, I just released a manifesto called Darknet Market Maximalism. Like I'm pushing the boundaries here for YouTube. I'm actually kind of surprised that video never got any strikes against it or anything, if I'm being completely honest. So I'm already kind of pushing it anyway. But yeah, last week he brought up something with COVID, and I was just like, yeah, listen, I can't really go into full on details on how I feel about that, which is true. That's one of the things I can't really go into, I guess. And there's other topics as well. But anyways, regarding what you brought up here with DNA not existing, yeah, this is too much for me, man. I took a look at that video you sent, and yeah, it's just too much on the kooky side for me. I'm fine with having like some conspiracies here or there, but I listened to like 10 minutes of that video and it sounded like an infomercial, Sounded like some guy who doesn't really have that many credentials, because he doesn't really, and he's being glazed by a podcast host. It's absolutely true that science is being weaponized against people to satisfy different political narratives. That I absolutely agree with. But this is just taking it a little too far, I think. But it's a relatively harmless conspiracy, so check it out if you're interested. But yeah, thanks for that donation, though, Leo. I appreciate it. And the thing about Leo, though, is he's allowed to rant about YouTube because he has mentioned to me that he's on Odyssey watching all my videos. So that's pretty awesome. And if you're listening now and you don't particularly care about YouTube, I really encourage you to subscribe on Odyssey or Rumble, and also to like all my videos and stuff on there. Because the more attention we get on that platform, the better. Because in the future, if, privacy discussion is heavily censored, very plausible, it's already kind of happening, then I will be kicked off YouTube. And at that point, we will have to reconvene on these other platforms, and it would be better if I already have a lot of subscribers on those platforms. All right. And lastly, we have a donation from Uppercase Enjoyer. And this message is in all caps. So there you go. He donates 0.011 XMR. He says, Xenu, you recently mentioned Boris, and I must ask, have you listened to Midori? Their music gets you higher than anything you can buy with Monero. And also, by the way, the domestic shipping for the 2-shirt deal should be $750 plus $375 equals $1125. Well, thank you, Uppercase Enjoyer. Yeah, I fixed the math on that on that t-shirt deal. That's been up for like a month too, and no one told me about that. So whatever, it's all good. But thanks. I can't do basic math evidently, which is kind of embarrassing. But I did fix that, so thanks. And yeah, regarding Midori, never heard of them. So for those who don't know, this came up in a super chat a couple weeks ago. We were talking about Boris, which is a Japanese punk band, where they play like, heavier kind of sludgy sounding metal. I encourage people to check out Boris. But anyway, he mentions this other Japanese band, Midori. Yeah, I never heard of them actually. Probably should know about them. So I checked them out. I will say I listened to like 4 or 5 songs from this one album, and I poked around with another album as well. Not too big on how they sound in the studio. Basically, this band, they are a punk band, but they mix that with jazz, and that's a very odd mix. So their music's very dissonant and like weird sounding, and it's hard to kind of hold on to it, right? It jumps around a lot in like different time signatures. It's kind of a similar vibe to like math rock, where it's just like always jumping around. And I don't really like that. I like to kind of groove on things. But I will say there's a lot of chaotic energy here, which is cool. And so I did watch also some live footage of them, and the live footage, some of those songs hit pretty damn hard. There's this one song in particular that looked like a mosh pit. And the thing is, they can harness that chaos. And if you are someone who like goes to shows, especially if they're playing heavier music, that chaotic energy is what gets people hype, right? So when you have that chaotic energy mixed with weirdness too, that creates a particularly feverish kind of energy when you see them live. So I would say with this type of band, I would like to see them perform, because I think it would be very interesting to watch. And they bring a lot of that energy to a live show. It would be more like a spectacle to kind of see. But yeah, listening to them though, it's too all over the place for me. A little too, just weird and just not grounded enough for me. So anyway, those are the super chats. Again, xmrchat.com/Xenu if you would like to donate. And yeah, we're gonna now move on to some channel updates. Not really much here. I did keep to my promise though. I have started releasing more videos on my channel, and yesterday I released a video about PGP. And PGP encryption. It's basically a kind of like a noob tutorial for it. I think the video came out fantastic. I'm really happy with it. And the video came out so good, even Robot learned how to use PGP. Isn't that right, Robot?
Beep boop. Begin PGP message. Lowercase j, capital A, capital R, lowercase c, 3, 5, lowercase z,
okay,
capital
let
D.
me just mute you there. Yeah, he understands how PGP works, but he hasn't figured out that humans can't decrypt PGP keys manually. So I've tried explaining that to him, but he just doesn't understand. But yeah, no, the video came out really well, I think. And I do want to have other videos like that, so I will be making a video of installing the Monero GUI wallet, and then I guess like running a node, through that and getting set up that way. So that's going to be coming out. I'm going to make another video about Feather Wallet, so that'll come out. This is like over the next month I'll be releasing videos like this. However, next week I will just because I had already mentioned it and I've started working on it, I will be making a video about dark IRC and installing that and stuff. So that should be coming out, next week. And I think that's going to come out pretty well too. So keep an eye out for that. And eventually, I also want to have Attack of the Poison Outputs come back. I guess that's being kind of pushed back now. I thought I'd be starting it now, but I had demand from listeners to get more beginner content. So I'm kind of prioritizing that. I only have so many hours here. I don't know what else to say. I am trying to dedicate the time I have to what people want. That's usually what you want to do. So anyways, okay, with the channel updates out of the way, we are now going to our featured story of the week, which is Tornado Cash. The Tornado Cash trial about Roman Storm and his conspiracy charge has now started. It started last week, and it will be ongoing over the next month. So every week on Anti Moonboy News, we will be covering all of the happenings that have been going on in this case, and I'll be giving some thoughts on the matter and trying to break down exactly what's happening. Now, to begin, I wanted to talk about why this case is important. Why is Tornado Cash an important case to follow? Roman Storm built a privacy tool, and now he is being put on trial because of that. To date, this is the most important trial that cryptocurrency has faced, but it has far-reaching implications that impact free open source software as a whole. The government argues that the code written by Roman makes him liable for several extremely serious charges, such as a conspiracy to commit money laundering, a conspiracy to commit sanctions violations. Yet Roman did not create a privacy tool to commit crime. Tornado Cash is a decentralized protocol. Funds in it can't be stopped. So effectively, if someone uses Tornado Cash, the funds go in, the funds go out, and it's a decentralized protocol. Someone like Roman Storm has no control over what's happening inside of the protocol. The service is mostly used by law-abiding citizens who want privacy. People who view the transparent issues of the Ethereum blockchain and who seek to protect themselves from the lurking threats that can occur when somebody connects a blockchain to an identity. Now, a recent example we saw, Coinbase had a KYC leak recently. If you have a lot of Ethereum, you might be concerned about that. Maybe you want to throw some of your Ethereum through Tornado Cash, separate yourself from a wallet that's linked to a KYC exchange. And we've seen wrench attacks grow, especially over the past 6 months with this increase in value of cryptocurrency in this market. So privacy and seeking privacy in cryptocurrency has never been more important, and Tornado Cash offers this. It offers freedom from this transparent blockchain that Ethereum is based on. But as is often the case, history works in a cyclical manner. And just like how encryption was targeted by the feds in the 90s as being pro-terrorist, now individuals fighting for financial freedom are seen as dangerous and supportive of criminal activity. The floodgates that can be opened by a bad ruling here are hard to downplay. Bitcoin and Monero developers could be argued as playing a role in the creation of peer-to-peer networks that facilitate illegal crime. But it isn't just cryptocurrency. One could argue that any code that is open source could be considered liable and a co-conspirator if a criminal used their service. And furthermore, a chilling effect would take place, and companies that are willing to develop tools with privacy in mind would either second-guess themselves or end up closing up shop. What is being argued is that developers of free and open source software should be in charge of the enforcement of crime, and that they are liable otherwise. It sets tremendous precedent on many different things. And overall, this is just another step into solidifying the state's complete surveillance of every portion of your life. And now they are coming after decentralized eCash, And so for the next month, I will be covering this case and giving updates as to what's happening. So our primary source for the coverage of Tornado Cash will be The Rage, which really shouldn't be a surprise to you guys. I've been shilling The Rage now for the past year. It is by far the best cryptocurrency journalism being done today. And so David Z. Morris and Lola Leitz have been doing a really incredible job covering this case. So I encourage people to check them out. I have been, for the most part, tailing their tweets that they've been making. So I'm not going to cite each individual article, but I encourage people to go to therage.co to read a lot of these details, or to read a lot of these stories in more detail. So it started off with the jury selection, and they had a large pool of 36 people that they later negotiated down after the prosecution and defense received biographical details of the jury. And David Morris, he brought up an interesting point that a lot of these people that they're selecting are from Westchester County, which means that they have higher incomes, or they are people who were in the financial industry. So they're actually probably going to be relatively knowledgeable about things happening. He also mentions that they were asked this particular question as to whether they watch Law and Order or CSI or any of these legal TV shows, maybe to see if they would have a distorted view as to how the legal process would work. I'm not really sure why they would ask that. And he also mentioned that they were asked if they read any newspapers, and most of them said they did not, which is pretty funny. So anyways, day one, the jury was selected, and they then gave opening statements. Now, the prosecution statement, quickly showed their hand. And essentially what the prosecution is going to be doing here is they are going to be arguing that Tornado Cash is primarily a haven for criminals. Okay, so what they did in their statement is they described a series of scams and hacks and other bad things that were later then laundered through Tornado Cash. They described how Roman did profit off of this, and their claim is that Tornado Cash was set up knowingly to profit off of criminal activity, and that Roman is responsible for preventing people from doing that. That he was also contacted by people to do that. People who were affected. He was later contacted by them and requested to, prevent funds from going into the pools that Tornado Cash had. But, Roman would just say, these pools are out of my control. I can't do anything. Which technically is the truth. The prosecutor, or the lead prosecutor, is Thane Wren. And he is a notable figure because he was one of the main guys responsible for putting SBF behind bars. So this guy does have legal experience with cryptocurrency. Although in that case, he was a good guy in that case because SBF obviously is a piece of garbage. But in this case, he's now going after our privacy rights. Quote, alluding to the deactivation of the protocol creator's master keys in 2020, Mosley argued that Storm had removed the switch that could have shut off one part of the washing machine so that he could claim that he was out of his control, meaning that he couldn't turn off Tornado Cash. But Storm had kept the laundromat open. He paid the electric bill, which is alluding to the fact that the web front end, whose active maintenance forms a key pillar of the prosecution's case, was maintained by Storm. So end quote there. So basically what they were doing is they're saying that by Roman Storm operating the website for Tornado Cash, that means that he was in control of Tornado Cash, which is obviously a little ridiculous. And by a little, I mean it's very ridiculous. He couldn't. It's a decentralized protocol. Operating the front end of a website is not the same as operating a peer-to-peer decentralized protocol. But that is what they're arguing. And they also mentioned that, or a key part of the evidence is a t-shirt that Storm was wearing. And the t-shirt was a washing machine with the Tornado Cash logo in it. Now, I'll be honest here, that is pretty awful optics. It's a funny joke, sure, but optically that looks terrible. And it is similar to with Samurai Wallet, where you had T-Dev talking about, not caring about dark net markets, even kind of being happy about its use in those markets. It's bad optics, and that could definitely be used to go against them with the jury. Now, for the defense had a quote here in their statement where they say, "It is not a crime to make a useful thing that is misused by bad people." I think that's a perfect statement. This is the crux of the defense. Yes, this tool was used by bad people, but it's also used by very good people. And this is just highlighting a small portion of the usage of this tool. They go on to say that there's many different products that are used for criminal activity that people use all the time, such as VPNs and private messaging services. They even argue that a hammer is a tool that can be used or misused by bad people. So the defense, they really make a push here, arguing that, Roman, he had nothing to do with these scams. He provided a service that helped the privacy of regular people who used Ethereum. And Ethereum is completely transparent, right? So like if you are a regular Ethereum user, that should probably bother you. I don't really know too many Ethereum people, to be honest with you. But I have read them kind of voice their opinions on this, and this is kind of a touchy subject for them because, transparency on the blockchain is not ideal. And, for the people who were passionate about it, I mean, a lot of them probably just use Monero for like privacy conscious kind of things. But there were examples given that, showed that people were using Ethereum and were using Tornado Cash, and they absolutely benefited from having Tornado Cash. The most high profile one that I've seen mentioned by multiple people is Vitalik. He used Tornado Cash when he was donating. It was used by regular people all the time, and the defense is basically saying that, and they're going to prove that. They also bring up the fact that it would be bad if you posted your bank statement on the internet, right? You don't want that. You don't want to, and your coworkers don't want to see you seeing how much they make and etc. And that's the thing. Like, it's such a silly argument of not caring about transparency on the blockchain. If everyone was relying on Ethereum or Bitcoin, the transparency is definitely not something you want. And this is why we are building privacy tools. And when you kind of frame it like this, I think this will be really effective with the jury, especially those who, don't use cryptocurrency. I think having these examples, will be really beneficial. The defense, they also addressed the washing machine t-shirt, and they said that it was like a meme, cartoon, it was a joke. I don't know how effective that statement is. It's just bad optics. I don't really think there's anything they can say here, but they did respond to that. And so the defense also kind of gives a brief history of how Tornado Cash came to be, and they said that Storm and other co-creators, they wanted to build a tool. They didn't want to commit crime. And the defense further says, quote, "The government is going to call people who did hack, who did scam, who did steal, and who will testify against Storm in hopes of reducing their own punishment," end quote. Yeah, and I think that's what we are going to see. I am going to get into the witnesses next. This is a strategy of the feds. They are going to just put a spotlight on all the bad that came out of this, and they're going to argue that Storm was a co-conspirator and that he profited off of that. So the first witness was Katie Lynn, who was scammed out of $190,000. And this is a pig butchering. And so, yeah, basically she was contacted on WhatsApp by a scammer who was, I think, posing as a real estate agent or something. Yeah, it was a real estate broker. And she received just a random DM. And eventually he was able to convince this lady to open an account on crypto.com, to buy some Bitcoin and withdraw it and deposit the money onto ntucapital.com, which was a fake website this guy had created. And basically they had it like rigged up where the investments she was putting in at first was only like $6,000. They made it look like she made a lot of money. So then she just threw in the rest of her $190,000 into Bitcoin and then just gave it to the site, who then just stole the money. So yeah, this is called pig butchering because you're kind of like fattening up the pig, or in this case, you're starting off small, but you're earning trust. So then they, give you a lump sum of cash which you can then run away with, or in this case, it was Bitcoin. The prosecutors showed messages from Lynn's representatives requesting Tornado Cash freeze the stolen funds. She didn't receive a reply. And on cross-examination, we learned her money had gone to Coinbase, Binance, and FTX. According to Lynn, she never recovered any of it. So, a couple things here. First off, it should be noted that these centralized services, where they're saying these funds also went to, they have no liability here. But Tornado Cash has this liability. Furthermore, she was contacted on WhatsApp. So why isn't WhatsApp facing criticism here, right? This WhatsApp is really what facilitated this this whole operation here. And then I found a Twitter thread from Tevano. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's very interesting, though. But basically, he looked into this and found that the blockchain forensics that was done by the feds is like very suspect, and he doesn't even really believe it. And he's actually able to find the exact transactions and piece them together. And he's arguing that the feds they're saying that, some of the funds with the Coinbase and Binance, whatever, but there's no proof of that. And it was likely that this individual just used a CoinSwap service and, received, in return, cryptocurrency back. But, what the feds are doing in their chain analytics is very faulty, is what this guy's saying. And that's not surprising, too. Like, we've seen this many times before with cases where, these blockchain forensics, it's kind of all for show. It's not even really that trustworthy. We also see here, too, that, she says she didn't receive a reply. I mean, if you're emailing the general Tornado Cash email and you just don't receive one reply, is that indicative of being ignored? I don't know. So yeah, this is essentially what the government's doing. They're throwing a bunch of people who got scammed in front of the jury, and they're trying to really make it seem like Tornado Cash was just laughing all the way to the bank while these poor innocent people were getting scammed. Their second witness was Joseph Evans, a lawyer who represented Bitmart, which was an exchange that got hacked in 2021. Funds were traced to Tornado Cash. Now, in this case, he did contact Roman Storm, and Roman Storm did respond to him, saying they did not have the ability to freeze or move Tornado Cash funds or pools. There was another witness regarding the hack with Ronin. Then there was a witness who was responsible for the NFT rug pull Frosties. This is someone who already pled guilty to fraud. And so in this case, he's probably just testifying to lower his sentence, right? Now, the last witness to bring up was this guy, Justin Bram. Now, this one's a little interesting, so this is quoted from The Rage. Prosecutors brought up screenshot messages between Bram and other community members that implied Storm's involvement in potential features of the platform and upcoming versions of Tornado Cash. The defense emphasized that Tornado Cash was non-custodial and decentralized, that the protocol was decentralized if no one person had a majority of Tornado Cash tokens. Storm's defense mentioned that Tornado Cash included geoblockers to block IP addresses in particular countries, but the government during its redirect used this to argue that the use of geoblocking implies the platform could have collected IP address information. Brand went on to agree with the prosecutors that the founders of Tornado Cash were responsible for the platform's front-end website. Yeah, I mean, is collecting IP address information like that relevant? I mean, that seems to be pretty flimsy. As it is, IP addresses is not like a damning thing that can be used in court. It's a very flimsy evidence. But, in front of a jury, maybe this would be enough to sway that, Roman Storm had all this control over things, which it just seems like he was operating a website and he had written code for Tornado Cash. But again, that's not the same as him being a co-conspirator like the government's claiming. So one of the funnier screw-ups this week from the prosecution was a FBI forensic accountant who had a pie chart of expenses. And, these expenses were like for payroll and recurring expenses and, things of that nature. But the defense, during their cross-examination, the defense was bringing up that all the pie charts that were presented, they were all mathematically incorrect, and that I think all of them did not equal 100%. So like one of the pie charts added up to 104%. Another one was at like 88% or something. There, and like the math was just like incorrect here and there, which is hilarious. Like, I don't know how they screwed this up. Like, you would think that they would just have the numbers like all come out to 100% if you're making a pie chart. But yeah, I mean, that was a big fail though from the prosecution, that this was somehow screwed up along the way. But something like this would definitely help give doubt to the jury, right? Because the prosecution doesn't even have the numbers right for something like expenses. It was also noted that the expenses that were done by Roman and his team were actually pretty modest, and they weren't even like making that much money, contrary to like the drug lord image that the feds are trying to implant into the minds of the jury. So then there was a whole debate about how the defense was using privacy as part of their defense, which I know that sounds ridiculous, but the prosecution had a bone to pick with this. So I'm going to read what they said. Okay. It is now necessary to preclude evidence and arguments based on privacy rights, the government argues today, because any testimony on the legitimate use of privacy services like Tornado Cash would be irrelevant and inflammatory and would invite impermissible discussions of privacy rights and/or nullification that Storm previously forswore. Storm has apparently interpreted that ruling as permitting Green, who I'll talk about in a sec, to testify broadly about some unspecified number of criminal incidents without any connection to this case and without any apparent evidentiary basis to suggest that such incidents bear on Storm's state of mind or that he was even aware of them, the government writes, asking the court that if such testimony were admitted, Storm should at least provide the dates on which they occurred and how they relate to Storm's state of mind during the charged time period. Okay, so basically the prosecution is arguing that the concept of a right to privacy is beyond the scope of what they're determining. And instead, it should be about the So basically, the prosecution is arguing that the overall concept of a right to privacy shouldn't be the discussion here, and instead it should be about Storm's, personal beliefs about privacy and how these things that have happened could have impacted his views on privacy, I think. This guy Green, who I mentioned in that quote, he is a journalist who is going to be presenting different cases in which people have been wrench attacked. And so, I'm not really sure. The technical details of this are kind of confusing, but basically, in a case that hinges on privacy, the prosecution is doing whatever they can to prevent people talking about people's privacy, which is ridiculous, but this is what they're arguing, that it's irrelevant, I guess, that people should have a right to privacy, and that, it's just nonsensical. Like, you would think that this is the fundamental reason why we have tools like Tornado Cash to protect people, from being attacked, right? From having their privacy attacked. So I would say this is like wholly irrelevant. And of course, the prosecution does not want that, because something like this would really speak to a jury, right? So in response to this, the judge said, like the defense, I understood the government's motion to be focused on First Amendment or constitutional principles, and that Mr. Storm was not to make arguments for jury nullification based on these principles. But I understood that if he testified, he would discuss his beliefs about privacy. I don't believe the government's motion was not meant to eliminate the use of the word or references to the concept of privacy. I think the government's concern was that Mrs. Axel referred to a right to privacy. I agree with the government that this comes very close to the line, so I am therefore cautioning the defense that while they can discuss privacy, to stay away from statements like the right to privacy, which have legal connotations that may not be aiming to get into. So again, they're saying that talking about privacy is fine, but the right to privacy is different, I guess. They're keeping it out of that broader term, or that's what they're attempting to do. I don't really understand this, but this is the legalese stuff gets, kind of over my head, but that's the case here. That's pretty much it. So, week one was pretty rudimentary for Tornado Cash. A lot of posturing here, but we now have confirmed what the feds have for their playbook, which is throw a bunch of people that got scammed in front of the jury and, try to convince them that Roman Storm was kind of callously and, recklessly acting as the leader of this operation that was like, kind of happy with the fact that people were getting scammed because it meant they were making more money. That's the image they're trying to proclaim. And meanwhile, the defense is saying, listen, Storm had nothing to do with this. And, accusing him of being a co-conspirator to all these crimes is ridiculous. He wasn't in the same room as these people. He had no contact with these scammers. He did not encourage any of it. Calling him a co-conspirator is ridiculous. He just wrote code, and later on that code was used. Overall, I feel pretty good after week one. I think the defense did great. Really the only issue was that t-shirt, I think. I think that t-shirt probably, it's just bad optics. But I think they did a really good job of, especially breaking down those pie charts. I mean, that stuff terrible from the prosecution. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. I also think that their argument about the IP addresses on the website is very flimsy. Frankly, I think a lot of their arguments are flimsy, as you guys should know. But I think the defense did a great job. So feeling a little more confident here, and I'm excited about the next week. So tune in to next week on Anti Moonboy News. We will be covering it, giving some more analysis on things. And Okay, before we get to the news, I'm going to do a little advertisement for my merchandise. So if you would like to donate to the show and also get something really cool back in return, you can buy one of my t-shirts. Go to antimoonboy.com/merch. And I have 2 t-shirt designs on there. One, of course, the camel, the cover of Darknet Market Maximalism. These have been selling really well. I will be replenishing this one if it does end up selling out. We're actually almost out of the large size, but I do still have some available. So, of course, the camel. And the other shirt design I have is the Genesis block. This is only limited edition, though, so I'm not going to be doing another print of this one. So I think there's only like 20 left. So if you're interested in that one, again, go to antimoonboy.com/merch for links to my XMR Bazaar profile. But alternatively, you can just send me an email, or you could DM me on Twitter. It doesn't really matter how you contact me, and we can go through the process that way. The shirts are $30 each plus shipping and handling. It's $20 for Europe, $7.50 domestically. So yeah, definitely check those out if you'd like to donate to the show, and yeah, get a cool t-shirt back. So yeah, let's get to the news, and we'll probably touch on each of these briefly, and then I will talk about a debate that happened recently between Monero and Lightning Network on a Twitter space. So we'll get to that, and then we'll be at the end of the show. All right, so the first thing is Ashigaru responded. Now, I don't know if I had some influence on this matter. I actually think I did, because I had, kind of had the headline news story last week regarding Ashigaru, and there's some concerns with how their signatures are implemented as part of the protocol, and some people have pointed out that this is actually an attack vector. So anyways, I had mentioned last program, like, hey, listen, guys, you need to respond to this, right? Because Samurai Wallet, I know they don't exist anymore, but when they did exist, you better believe if there was some FUD coming at Samurai Wallet's way, TDev would be responding within a few seconds, calling the guy bad words and, saying why he's right. Now, I'm not saying Ashigaru has to go to those lengths, but it would be nice to just have them have, just some sort of dialogue where they're, acknowledging these criticisms and providing solutions. So they did put out a response, and then other people responded to that response, and I don't think they've responded to the response of their response, if you're following me. But I did see on a GitHub, there is at least some sort of dialogue going, which is good. And, for me, I'm concerned about these issues, and I just want some clarification, just because I do have some trust issues with this wallet, and I'm not willing to full on endorse it yet. But, honestly, if they kind of iron out the criticisms for this signature stuff, I would feel a lot more comfortable with promoting it on Anti Moonboy. And yeah, maybe I'll make a video showing how to use it, which I do want to do. I do want to help out, the Bitcoin crowd here as well. Bitcoin's still used on darknet markets, so we have to put some respect on its name still. So, anyways, that is Ashigaru. I hope that they at least respond to the latest criticisms and work out or at least iron out the details as to how to confront this attack vector. And check out the GitHub link. I'll have it in the description box if you want to follow the up-to-date details on that. Next up, Senator Lummis calls alleged U.S. Bitcoin dump a strategic blunder. So this week, a Freedom of Information Act was completed by Lola Leitz of The Rage. She's all over the place this episode. But anyways, she did this in response to this guy on Twitter who wanted to know how much Bitcoin the United States was holding. And apparently, based on what has been seen, and so basically what was seen is that it looks like the United States government has sold more than 80% of its Bitcoin stash, which drops their total holdings quite a bit from the 198,000 Bitcoin that was held last year or earlier this year. So I don't know when this dump actually occurred. I don't really have like the up-to-date details on that. I don't think it's available. But yeah, they did dump a lot of their Bitcoin according to this Freedom of Information Act response. And yeah, this is kind of in line with what the government's been doing. They kind of say one thing that, they really support Bitcoin, it's the future. And then on the other hand, not only are they attacking privacy rights, but they're not doing, or they're not making a strategic reserve. It was all a meme. It was another lie from the Trump administration. And, people who are really clamoring for these strategic reserves, they look like idiots, such as the Moonboy of 2024, Dennis Porter. I mean, have you even heard that guy's name at all over the past couple months? He's totally irrelevant now because all of his lobbying, for the most part, did not work. And we're kind of looking at this, narrative, pretty much squashed. The government did not completely support Bitcoin like they said they did, or they said they would. So in other news, the U.S. House passed several crypto bills this week, or last week, I should say. One was the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act. The second was the Clarity Act. And the third was the Genius Act. Now, the Genius Act is really the big one regarding stablecoins, which we've talked a lot about on this program. And basically, it's just bringing in a lot of regulatory oversight to stablecoins. So now they're going to have to back things one-to-one. They're going to have to comply with chain analysis. They're really going to be watching stablecoins now. And so I think a lot of the crime associated with stablecoins is going to start to be diminished because blockchain forensics is going to be crawling all over that now that the government has a handle on it legally. The Clarity Act defines digital assets as securities or commodities. I haven't really looked into this one too much, but it's mostly targeted at, providing some clarity, which is, in the name. And lastly, the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act prohibits the Fed from directly or indirectly issuing a CBDC to individuals. But of course, like the CBDC stuff it's kind of a distraction, right? Because obviously they've just deferred over to stablecoins as being the the CBDC. It's just stablecoins. So this is kind of a nothing burger. I mean, it looks nice to people who aren't really paying attention, I guess. So. All right, for the last topic, we're going to be talking about the Lightning Network Monero debate that happened this weekend on X between Body Anarchist and Super Testnet. Now, the way things started, it was pretty funny because the debate was actually hosted by Layer 2 Labs or Lightning Labs. I forget the name of the company, but it's actually a Lightning Network company, and they had a guy kind of like read like an introduction to the debate, and he said something along the lines of, will Lightning Network dethrone Monero as the king of privacy? And I find that to be pretty amusing if you really think about it, because how long had we heard how Bitcoin and all their privacy issues would be solved with Lightning Network? This was the narrative for years. But somehow, some way, that narrative is switched. And now Monero is being openly appreciated as the king of privacy. Have you guys noticed that? And really, the reason this has happened is because of darknet market adoption. This is actually why people are acknowledging Monero now. The clout that Monero has gained from this adoption is very obvious. People are respecting Monero now. I mean, it's now been adopted on darknet markets for 5 years, which is a long time, actually. And yeah, this adoption is provable, and it's being used by people who are just regular people who don't care about cryptocurrency. They're using it as a tool. And this is very notable, right? So yeah, I find this framing to be very interesting because, for the longest time, we just heard about how Lightning Network was better than Monero and that Monero is just a shit coin, whatever. Now it's, well, actually, Monero is the king of privacy, and does Lightning Network stand a chance? And what's also funny about this, too, is like Lightning Network had all the opportunity to take over on the darknet. If you really think about it, like Bitcoin, if you look at through the history of Bitcoin on darknet markets, it was used with very poor privacy because privacy wasn't very well understood for a long time. You then had these mixers and these tumblers, and those also didn't really work. And then you had people using coin joins and, Whirlpool in those implementations, which do work in a lot of cases. you can actually argue that a lot of these, even mixers, do work against chain analysis. Based on what I've seen from a lot of these companies, they often exaggerate and lie about their findings. But anyways, that went on for a while, and at no point did darknet markets even attempt to use Lightning Network. Never happened. They just started using Monero, and now Monero is the dominant cryptocurrency on these markets, at least the drug markets. On the broader scale, black markets are probably mostly using Tether and stable coins and stuff. Ransomware, there's still liquidity issues with Monero relative to Bitcoin. But on these traditional darknet markets, basically the Silk Road, these drug markets, it's Monero. Monero is the dominant choice here. And, why did that happen? Well, it's not just because, Lightning Network isn't the savior of privacy like it's shilled as. It's got awful UX. People still have issues using Lightning Network. And, to solve this, it's just becoming more and more centralized. So regarding the debate between Supertestnet and Body, it's frustrating to listen to something like this. Now, I think Body crushed it. Body's very good at debating. And he was able to counter a lot of Supertestnet's wordiness with very direct, cut through the BS. And he clearly researched what he was talking about too, because he knew a lot about Lightning Network, and he was able to basically pick apart everything Supertestnet was throwing at him. I think Body did phenomenal. Disclaimer, I only listened to the first 2 hours because this thing is 4 hours long. Okay. But I think Body did great. And what's really frustrating about Supertestnet is he'll say something like, it's actually really difficult to use Monero privately. He literally says that. And it's dude, it's not really difficult to use Monero privately. How do we know this? Because Monero is the cryptocurrency of choice on darknet markets. And a lot of the people on darknet markets are just regular people who want to get from point A to point B. Okay? They want to get from point A to point B. They don't care about all this technical discussion. They're not going to listen to this debate. Okay? They're not going to read the white papers. They don't care. They just want to get drugs. They want to get high. Okay? And you know what they're doing? They're going online and they see other people recommend using Monero, and they're like, oh, okay, I'll use Monero. That's it. That's what's happening. We are still so far away from understanding how cryptocurrency privacy works. If people are still debating these very subtle differences between cryptocurrencies, or they're debating these nuanced attack vectors. Sure, if you are full on studying a cryptocurrency, these are important. But for the average person, they don't care. They just want something that's plug and play, easy to use. Built-in privacy. Everything's just right there for you. So, Super might say, well, it's actually really difficult to use Monero privately. Okay? If it's so difficult, then why is it the cryptocurrency of use on the largest peer-to-peer economy that depends on privacy? And you know what? He has no answer to that. So instead, he seethes. He has this narrative about RoboSats being a darknet market, which is the most pathetic cope I think I've ever heard in my life. I mean, this guy Supertestnet, he's just digging himself a hole, and he's losing a lot of support. Really the only people supporting Supertestnet are the very the long gone laser eye types of people who they're not privacy advocates. But if Supertestnet is trying to win over people who care about privacy, he is going about it at the worst possible way, because people actually respect Monero. Again, why do they respect Monero? It's used on darknet markets. That clout that Monero gets from that is massive. The problem that Body faces is that he has to argue about privacy with somebody who is talking about hypotheticals. He's kind of talking about this idealized version of Lightning Network Whereas with Monero is actually battle tested and used, so we have all of this documentation and data about it. Whereas Lightning Network, it's not being used, especially in adversarial environments. So it's like already a very mismatched debate to begin with. So the last thing I'll say here, and this is important, if Lightning Network were to be used on darknet markets, you better believe that it would be successfully attacked in many different ways. We could talk about Monero being attacked because it is being attacked right now by law enforcement. But Lightning Network, it's really not being attacked. No one really cares about it. But if we start to see darknet adoption for it, you better believe law enforcement will be looking at all the data from all these centralized nodes, and they would be pwning people because of it. Because most people are not using Lightning Network like you super testnet. They're not. Plus, all else equal, the centralization of Lightning, it's only going to get worse over time. Because that centralization is how layer 2 will grow. You know, people aren't running their own nodes. They're relying on centralized infrastructure. And so because of that, that centralized infrastructure will be attacked with regulations unless they comply. And spoiler alert, they will comply. And this is why we know that Lightning Network isn't being used in adversarial environments, because they haven't dealt with the legal stuff yet. You know, the second there's any concern about Lightning Network being used to like avoid sanctions or whatever, you're going to see the crackdown like overnight. It'll be like with Samurai Wallet. You'll see a crackdown and a chilling effect. So anyways, that's the episode. See you guys next week. AntiMoonboy.com. And if you want to send a super chat, xmrchat.com/Xenu. Tune in next week for week 2 of Tornado Cash.